Today on Inspired Money.
You can't just put your show out there, have smart keywords, and expect people to discover you anymore. You've really got to go out and be more active about finding your audience and connecting with those people and bringing them in and being creative as you do that. So it has really changed in that sense, but also, the barriers to entry are less because it's easier, it costs less to get good microphones. And I think people understand how to get good audio better. And so, the quality is a lot better, which makes that kind of less of a differentiating point and really means that you've got to have good content and you've got to separate yourself with your content and your ability to connect with an audience if you want to be able to have any staying power.
This is episode 99 with professional podcaster and content strategist, Jerod Morris. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If it's your first time listening, welcome. Inspired Money is different from other personal finance podcasts because we don't want to just learn how to live with money. We want to help each other to live richer lives, make a greater impact, and together, make the world a better place. So how are you trying to make a greater impact? I want to hear from you because I want you to be a part of episode 100 next week. Do you have an inspired money story? Do you have a favorite episode that helped you? If so, how did it help? Or do you have a favorite money tip that you'd like to share with other inspired moneymakers? Here's your chance to share it. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/hello100. That's hello 100. And leave a 90-second voice message. It's super easy, and I hope to hear from you. Today's guest is Jerod Morris. I'm excited to have Jerod on the show today because he and Johnny Nastor together are the showrunner, a podcast about podcasting from two guys with over 1,500 episodes of experience. I learned so much about launching and running Inspired Money by listening to the Showrunner podcast from their course and community. It was just a year ago that I made mention on the Showrunner.
Alrighty, so speaking of grizzled showrunner veterans, this week we want to shine our showrunner spotlight on another member of the Showrunner podcasting course, the host of the Inspired Money podcast, Andy Wong. Now, Andy just released the 49th episode of his weekly show, meaning that he is on the cusp of making it through his first full year as a showrunner. Congratulations on that, Andy. And Andy hasn't made it this far by accident. He is a diligent student of podcasting and is incredibly committed to constantly improving his show for his audience, which I have learned just through my interactions with him.
So here we are. This is episode 99. We fast forward about a year from that recording, and I can't believe how quickly time has gone by. So Jerod's a writer, podcaster, and content strategist with over a decade of experience building online audiences and helping others to do the same. In this episode, you'll learn Jerod's meandering career path that led to more than 5 podcasts and content marketing, the importance of learning by doing, and we discuss podcasting today and the importance of positioning. Whether you are a podcaster or not, this applies to marketing in general. Ways to rise above the noise. Now let's get inspired with Jerod Morris. Jerod, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Man, Andy, thank you for having me here. It is truly an honor to be on the show. It's been awesome to see your show grow and to see the success that you've had with it. And I never really thought that I'd actually be on it. So it's really cool to actually be here.
Well, the pleasure is mine because you and Johnny have had a direct impact on this show and the production of the show and shaping the show. Even your feedback early on was super helpful. I think that the music that plays after the intro going into the interview, that was the result of your feedback. So thank you.
It's those kind of stories are rewarding to hear. It's always so much fun to work with podcasters and just to try and pass on, some of the stuff that we've learned, to new people who are starting out. And shoot, you're almost to 100 episodes, so you're a grizzled veteran by now.
Yes, I've got a little more gray hair to show for it. So let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
My earliest childhood memory of money. So there are really two of them. I know you said earliest, but I don't know, like, timing wise, kind of when these happened to put them in chronological order. But one of them is a trip that I took to my grandparents' house. And I don't remember what spurred this or like why this came about, but I just remember during this entire trip being compelled to search for loose change everywhere. In their house, in the couch cushions. We'd go to the store, like on the ground, looking in. Remember, payphones. Remember payphones way back in the day. And you could the little silver thing where the money would come down, and you'd look in there just to see if maybe there was a stray quarter or a stray dime. So looking in there, and for some reason, just having this little plastic bag and putting this change in the plastic bag. And of course I got to keep, whatever I found. And then I was really young. I was probably, 4 or 5 maybe at this time. I don't remember exactly what the age was, but I remember that. And for whatever reason, to this day, if I actually do see a payphone, I will always remember that, and always kind of be compelled to stick my finger in there, see if there's a stray quarter in the bottom of it. And then my second memory of money is going around to my neighborhood in the first house in Indiana that my parents lived in when we first moved there, and offering to sweep people's porches for money. Because, it's Indiana in the fall, leaves, come down and porches get really messy. So I would go around and offer to sweep people's porches for money, 25 cents, 50 cents, or, some kind of package deal if they wanted me to sweep the back too. But those are really the first two. And I would have like a little, one of these, a little pouch kind of that I would keep around my neck that I would put the money in when I got it. And it was a nice way to just go out and actually feel empowered that I could actually go out and just earn some money on my own just by working for it. So those are my two earliest memories of money.
I love those. You were industrious even as a young kid.
Yeah, and again, like I would love to go back and see what spurred the whole searching for loose change thing. I don't know if that was just something that I was doing anyway, or if, my grandparents had, suggested that to me in some way. And, same thing with the porches. I don't recall if that was something that my parents kind of suggested and, maybe pushed me into, or if that was an idea that I came up with on my own. But it was a nice early lesson, I suppose. And, if you want money, if you need money, there are ways to go out there and either find it or work for it. So you might as well get up and get moving.
So, Jerod, I tried doing a little bit of research in preparation for this call. You have a Wikipedia page, and I saw on there that you made national news with a blog post.
I did. Yes. So that was 2008, I guess. So I was running a sports blog called Midwest Sports Fans at the time. And, to make a long story short, basically I was in a fantasy baseball league. Are you a big baseball fan?
I am not, but my brother Chris is a big-time baseball fan and used to be like hardcore into fantasy baseball until his daughter was born, and he was like, it's either my family or fantasy sports, and he chose his family.
That sounds so much like me.
He stopped cold turkey.
Yeah, I've pretty much done the same thing. I think I'm in one league now that I've just been in forever, like it's a family league, and I never pay attention to it, so I always feel really bad. But yeah, I've basically had to get out of all my other leagues. When your time gets short, you have to make some of those choices. But anyway, in baseball, obviously, steroids was a big issue, has been for a long time. And so back in 2008, there was this baseball player named Raul Ibanez who was off to a really hot start. He was hitting all these home runs, and he was never a guy who was known as a big home run hitter. Well, he had moved from the American League over to the National League. And sometimes when guys change leagues or they go to a new ballpark, they're a lefty and the right outfield wall isn't that far away, so maybe their swing leads to more home runs. There can be lots of reasons why guys start hitting more home runs. So anyway, these guys that I was in a fantasy baseball league with, Raul Ibanez happened to be on my team, and we were all just kind of bantering back and forth on our message board about maybe the reasons why he was having this home run binge. And of course, the first thing everybody said was he's probably on steroids, because that was just kind of what you assumed about baseball back then, because steroids had been such a big issue and no one really trusted their testing program. And so I had this website, Midwest Sports Fans, and decided to blog about it. And my basic, the way that I wanted to attack the piece was, okay, obviously this conversation is out there. And it wasn't just us in the message boards. Like people, were talking about it elsewhere on the internet. Like, oh man, Raul Ibanez, he's got to be, juicing because he's hitting all these home runs. And so I wanted to approach it from, okay, is there anything else statistically that we could look at that might suggest why he's having a short-term bump in home runs? Again, because of changing parks, maybe he's in a new spot in the lineup, all these different reasons. And, kind of went through them systematically and basically concluded, maybe you could explain it, but nothing really fully explains it. And one of the problems, is Major League Baseball doesn't have a lot of credibility in this area because, so many other guys have been found to use steroids. So there's just no real way to know. It absolutely did not say one way or the other that I thought he was using steroids. I titled it "The Curious Case of Raul Ibanez and Steroid Speculation," because again, that speculation is what kind of led to writing the article. Well, as you've probably learned, as other people probably know, a lot of people, when they read online, they read the headline, they might read the introduction, but then they skim. And sometimes they don't even get past the headline, especially if it's just on Twitter. So this article was taken by a couple of people in the media as being accusatory of Raul Ibanez about using steroids, which, again, it unequivocally was not, right? Like that was one of the possibilities posited, but only because kind of every baseball player was under suspicion at that time. Nothing specific about him. So, a writer in Philadelphia who was playing for the Phillies at the time wrote about it, and it kind of became this game of telephone where it actually got to him. And he, someone showed him the article and he was quoted as saying like, some blogger in his mom's basement's accusing me of steroids, whatever. I'll take a test. I'm clean, blah, blah, blah. And it ended up becoming like a larger meta conversation about like bloggers and the responsibility of bloggers and what their place is in the mainstream media. And it ended up, I was on ESPN's Outside the Lines with Ken Rosenthal and John Gonzalez talking about it. It was interesting because Ken Rosenthal, who's a national writer for baseball, was really accusatory and very negative about it, and kind of admitted to me later on that he had not actually read the full piece. And he and I, had some email exchanges about it. So it was a really good lesson for me as someone who creates online content in being really careful about what you put as the headline for a piece, because sometimes people are going to base their entire opinion on your piece just on the headline. And so if you make sure that you say exactly what you mean in the headline and be clear about it, because not everybody's going to actually read the full piece. So anyway, that was my first kind of experience with something like that. And it was negative in the sense that I got accused of doing something I didn't do, which I was mortified by from the perspective of Ibanez, who's a player that I respected and liked, because I think if he actually read the article, he would have appreciated the way that I went about it. And I actually ended up writing him a long, 4-page letter trying to just kind of explain it and see eye to eye on it. I never heard back from that. But it was also a good, again, a good lesson, an early lesson in kind of the negative impact of going viral, but also the positive impact in terms of the attention that it brought to the site.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. In your view, is there negative publicity, or is it all about reach? And even with the headline where people make assumptions, I mean, it did benefit the website with more people reading it, hopefully.
It did. I don't know if there is a blanket answer that I can give to that. I think attention, and a lot of attention, is good if you handle it the right way. If you don't handle it the right way, the negative attention can be the worst thing that you could possibly get, because now you've got these eyes on you, but if people don't like what they see when they take a deeper look, then you may have more negative opinions formed about you. I was very fortunate to have some good people around me giving me good advice, and really tried hard to handle the situation without rancor and with humility. And I think that helped. Not backing down, I firmly stood my ground in all of the responses and made it clear that I thought people were taking it out of context, but also tried to admit where maybe I could have been a little bit more clear, so kind of try to balance that. And I think a lot of people ended up appreciating that reaction. So I think in that sense, it helped because the way that we kind of approach it as a site earned us some respect. And so I think that's what's so important when you get attention, especially if it's quick attention that you're not expecting, is being ready to handle it in a way that the impression that you're giving off is going to reflect well upon you and actually be the one that you want to give off. And it can be really easy, when you get in that situation and it's all happening quick and it's all happening fast, to put a foot forward that you later regret. And so I feel fortunate that situation turned out like it did, but I also know that a lot of intentional thought went into it, even in the moment, to really try to put that right foot forward.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting experience to go through. How did your experience as a blogger, what was the relationship between that, your fantasy sports, your blogging, to your professional career as a content marketer, blogger, podcaster?
It was all fully intertwined. And I really just kind of stumbled into it. I had moved to Dallas because I was going to go to law school and was doing some work with a lawyer who also happened to be a sports agent. And one day, went and met him at a coffee shop, and he was there meeting with a friend. And so got to talking with his friend, and he had just started a digital marketing company here in Dallas and needed someone just to do some writing work. Again, I wasn't in law school yet. I was preparing to go and had a few extra hours where I could do some writing for him. And, he and I ended up hitting it off, found that I was really intrigued by what he was doing, helping small businesses with SEO, helping small businesses, create websites, get the word out. And this was, in kind of the nascent days of search engine optimization. And so, decided to take on a bigger role, with him at his company. But I didn't have any experience with WordPress, didn't have any experience with SEO, with any of this stuff. And so I thought, for me, the best way to learn is just to kind of have some clay to kind of play with and mold and like a sandbox to play in. And so I just thought, well, let me just start a website, but let me try and make it something that I would actually enjoy creating content about, so I have something to practice on. And, sports had always been a big interest for me. My dad was a college football coach and then an NFL scout. My mom was a big sports fan. I grew up playing basketball. So, sports had always interested me, and I'd thought about a career, in sports journalism way back in the day. And so just decided to do it about sports. Figured, ESPN and some of those sites had general sports fairly well covered. So I should probably try and do a little bit of a niche. And that's where the idea for Midwest sports fans came from, because I'm from the Midwest. And those would be the teams that I would like to write about. So started that site, and then, it just became this thing on the side that I was doing. But, it scratched an itch that was maybe more powerful than I thought. And I really enjoyed writing the content, and it started to take off a little bit. And obviously that experience with the Raul Ibanez piece, that really drew some attention to it and started to get us more traffic. And we actually realized that, we were kind of a small growing company and needed all the revenue that we could get. And, by putting some online ads on there, we realized this could be a small little place where we could earn some extra revenue. What was kind of funny is as it started to drive more traffic, there would be times where it would get a big link from a site like Deadspin or SI.com or one of these big sites, and it would crash. And so Derek, my business partner, who, had a technology background, decided, well, there's got to be a better way to host this thing. And so actually kind of devised his own hosting stack that really worked well, and especially worked well for viral traffic and being able to ramp up and ramp down, your needs, as your traffic was spiking. And so we put it on there and realized other bloggers might need this. So kind of marketed it to some other bloggers that I knew, and they took us up on it. And that's, so we just kind of not really fell into, but it wasn't something that we planned, but we ended up starting a hosting company. And that's actually how I ended up over at Copyblogger, because when they were looking to acquire a hosting company that would eventually form the back end of, Rainmaker and StudioPress sites and all of that, they acquired us. And so that's how I ended up coming over and becoming a part of Copyblogger. And those side projects still endure to this day, the Assembly Call, which is the IU basketball podcast that I do. That was an offshoot of Midwest Sports Fans. And so, even once I started Copyblogger, the side projects always were just the place that I tested stuff out and tried stuff. And so, if I was speaking on webinars or writing articles about, going out and driving traffic and doing that kind of stuff and doing content marketing, building an email list, I had personal experiences that I could really share because I was actually out there doing it. And so they were really important to me in terms of the experience that they provided, but also I think just in terms of credibility. It's very easy when you get to a site like Copyblogger to ride on the coattails of people like Brian Clark and Sonia Simone, who are, legends when it comes to content marketing and creating amazing content. So it was nice to have a few examples of my own of, hey, I've done this on my own too, not to the level of them, but some modest success in comparison. It kind of helped me know what I was talking about and have a little bit of credibility when talking about it.
I think that you studied finance, real estate, and entrepreneurship. So your work seems to match your area of study. When you graduated from school, did you know what you wanted to do? Because a lot of what you're talking about sounds like happenstance. It's like you ran it, you met somebody and one thing led to another.
Pretty much everything that's happened to me since college has kind of been that. I mean, to answer your question, no, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought for a while when I was in college that I wanted to write movies and make movies. And, a couple of friends and I, wrote scripts and had a production company and shot some short films. But and again, when I went to college, I thought I wanted to be a journalist or I thought I wanted to work in sports. And when graduation came around, I really didn't know. And I went to a call out meeting for Teach for America, which is an amazing program where they take, really highly qualified college students and put them into very high risk, low income schools. And, obviously the pay isn't great. I mean, you're doing it for this opportunity to really have a positive impact on kids. And I just walked out of that meeting so inspired and decided that's what I wanted to do. And so I applied for that program, didn't make it. So I didn't get Teach for America, which is very disappointing. But a relative of mine in Florida had actually started an alternative school, which was for basically kids who, high school age kids who had gotten kicked out of their schools, were basically one step away from going to jail, and they sent them to this alternative school. And so it was kind of like a Teach for America type opportunity. And so I went and did that for about 4 to 5 months before realizing that I really just wasn't cut out for it and couldn't handle it very well. And so going from, again, studying entrepreneurship, finance and real estate, to that, and then to what I'm doing now, it's definitely something that I never could have predicted, except for the fact that, so a lot of the things I'm doing now, in terms of the Assembly Call, being connected to sports and to Indiana basketball, which I was a fan of from when I was really young, and writing and doing podcasts. When I look back at stuff that I used to do in elementary school and in high school, it's a lot of the stuff that I really love to do. It's almost like I came back around to the stuff that I used to love when I was a kid. Like joke with my friends about this. Like we used to sit in our basement and we would record these things that we called adventures. And they were like these little scripts that we would write about us going on these amazing adventures, and we would record them and do all the voices and then do some little kind of basic editing on them and then play them for each other as just these little fun gags. We would stay up at night doing these, and it was kind of like a podcast. And it's funny how now in my professional life, I've kind of come around on the stuff that I used to kind of play doing back in the day. So it's almost like I had to kind of wander around in this wilderness trying to figure out what I should be doing, when now I've kind of come back around to doing stuff that I always used to love doing, but now I've obviously found a more productive way to channel it.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you're not a radio guy, because when I hear you speak and I hear your voice, I have the impression that you have some background in radio.
No background in radio, although I will say there's a radio station here in Dallas, The Ticket, that has probably been one of the greatest inspirations for me as a podcaster in terms of, it's this little, radio station they started, I don't know, probably 25 years ago. I think they were the first all sports radio station in Dallas, but they've always kind of had this small independent vibe to them. And they just have this really authentic connection with their audience. They're very, very real and authentic, and and just some of the things that they do, like they have all these inside jokes. It's the kind of stuff that will totally turn off a first-time listener, and really turned me off the first time I listened. But I kind of gave it a chance and stuck around, and then I got it. And then it's like you're in the inner circle, and you just become a real loyal listener. And so many of those kind of lessons that I've learned just by being a listener, I've tried to incorporate in the podcast that I do.
Coming up after the break, we talk about podcasting today, the importance of positioning, and more. The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/099. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check the show notes if you want to learn more about Jerod or things mentioned in this episode. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Today I want to talk about out-of-date beneficiary designations because it's a common mistake and it could be costly. Let's start with this. Have you picked your beneficiaries for your retirement account or 401k? If you haven't, go do it as soon as possible. If you have no named beneficiaries, either because you never named them or your beneficiaries predeceased you, your assets may pass to your estate or be forced to go through probate, which can be very costly. If your IRA ends up going into your estate rather than to a named beneficiary, the estate can be forced to withdraw funds and pay the tax on those withdrawals over a fairly short period of time. If you're not sure if you've selected your beneficiaries, call your brokerage or bank or 401k provider and ask. If you have selected your beneficiaries, when was the last time that you updated them? Life events like marriage, divorce, birth of children, deaths, or other events are reasons for needing to check and, if necessary, update beneficiary statements. You can usually make your beneficiary designations or changes to them by completing a form from your financial institution and signing it. It's usually pretty easy. This is extremely important because what the beneficiary statement says trumps your estate plan. It's prudent to periodically check, and I suggest every 3 to 5 years, your beneficiary designations and see if anything should be changed. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget that if you want to leave a voice message and be included in episode 100 next week, go to inspiredmoney.fm/hello100. That's hello 100. Whether you leave a message or not, I still would love to hear from you. What do you want to hear more of in the next 100 episodes? Schedule a 15-minute call at inspiredmoney.fm/15. I'd love to chat with you and hope you'll share ideas on what you like and what you don't like about the show. I want you, the listener, to help steer the direction of Inspired Money. So let's chat. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong. How many podcasts are you involved with now?
How many podcasts am I involved with now? So let's see. Currently active ones that I'm producing new episodes for: the Assembly Call, Podcast on the Brink, and Unemployable with Brian Clark. And then I just recently helped produce the Thinker's Manifesto podcast by Sean Jackson, which was an 8-episode show, really highly produced show. And eventually we'll probably do more episodes of it, but right now it just kind of lives as kind of a capsule podcast. And then obviously the showrunner, which we went on a hiatus, right before the new year, and so much has changed since then, and we just haven't gotten back to it. But I think that's kind of all the ones right now, and there are, some others in the past that are no longer active. But those are all the ones that are kind of still that I've done and that are still active, or at least semi-active.
Which is a lot. I mean, I'm hopeful that showrunner will be returning soon, but that is a lot of shows.
It is a lot of shows. And, part of the reason why, for example, showrunner hasn't returned is just because, neither John nor I want to get in there and kind of half-ass it. We want to be able to give it our all when we're in there. And unfortunately, we just haven't had the time to do that now. And, I've struggled in the past with saying no to opportunities or trying to take on too much and then spreading myself too thin. And so not really doing anything well, but just doing a lot. And I'm trying to force myself to focus more on quality, and even the number of podcasts that I have going right now, I don't know how sustainable that is. So we'll just have to see, but I'm really trying to focus more on, when I do something, really being able to invest what I feel like is 100% in it, as opposed to just trying to put a lot out there, because the world does not need more mediocre content. There's plenty of content out there. I mean, that actually wasn't a terrible strategy 10 years ago, but now, not only I think does it do a disservice to myself and anybody who pays attention to that content, but it's just not going to work.
Right. So in the area of podcasting, clearly launching one today, it's not the same as if you were doing it in 2005.
No, not at all. I mean, when you were doing it in 2005, if you chose your niche smartly, there was a pretty good chance that you were going to get noticed, just because there weren't that many options out there for podcasts. Now, on the one hand, it's a blessing that there are so many different podcasts out there, because it's bringing a lot of new podcast listeners into the market, and that's a good thing. Obviously, the more listeners that are here, the more opportunity that there is for all of us to connect with more people who are interested in our content. But man, it feels like now for every niche, there are 10, 15, 100, 1,000 shows, depending on what your niche is. I mean, just Indiana basketball podcast, right? Which, I mean, that's a pretty particular niche. I mean, when we launched the Assembly Call, there was, I think, one other IU basketball podcast out there, Crimson Cast. And now, not only do I host 2 of them, but there's like 10 other ones out there. And it's like, and this is just for one little college basketball team, and you go on there and look. I mean, I know you've experienced this, in terms of, podcasters who have a financial background. There's a lot of those shows out there too. You can't just put your show out there, have smart keywords, and expect people to discover you anymore. You've really got to go out and be more active about finding your audience and connecting with those people and bringing them in, and being creative as you do that. So it has really changed in that sense, but also, the barriers to entry are less, because it's easier, it costs less to get good microphones. And I think people understand how to get good audio better. And so, the quality is a lot better, which makes that kind of less of a differentiating point, and really means that you've got to have good content, and you've got to separate yourself with your content and your ability to connect with an audience if you want to be able to have any staying power.
Yeah. So I want to pick your brain a little bit, because clearly the opportunities are still there. One does have to up their game. You're big on positioning. So whether it's a podcast or a blog, why does positioning matter?
Positioning is everything. And it's interesting that you asked me about launching a podcast, because that's actually something that I haven't done in full force in a while. And so that's actually something that before I, launched a new podcast, I would want to go up and, go and study, because so many things have changed. But one thing I know that hasn't changed, because it never will, is the power of positioning. Because number one, if there are more options out there, your positioning just matters more and more, because if I'm going to look for a podcast about, any topic, and there are 10 options there, how am I going to choose which one I'm going to listen to? And it's easy to say, if you're the podcast host, well, I want you to choose mine. Yeah, but do you? Because what if I'm not actually the type of listener that you want? It's like, for our Assembly Call podcast, we made a very conscious decision early on. We wanted our positioning to be, we're going to analyze the team, and we'll, be critical of the team, but we're coming at this from, really supporting the program and trying to do it in a positive way. So if you're someone that just, wants to hear the negative stuff and bashing players, well, we don't want you to choose our podcast. So we're going to position ourselves in a certain way that, yeah, when you're looking for this type of podcast, we're an option, but we want you to know exactly what you're getting, and we want to know kind of exactly what we're getting as a listener. And so, kind of drawing that line in the sand is very important, because, if you want to build a long-term relationship with an audience, there has to be that understanding, and there has to be that authenticity there. And positioning is how you do that. Being properly positioned, to get attention from the right kind of audience, that's how you get noticed in the first place, and that's how you keep people coming back. And you have to have both of those things. I think a lot of people focused on the getting noticed, And that's fine. Getting the first listen is great, but it doesn't really mean anything if that person doesn't come back. Podcasting is not a medium where you can just go make a quick buck because you put one episode out there that gets 100,000 downloads. I mean, I guess if you're, smart enough and you put some advertising on there, yeah, maybe you can get a little bit. But podcasting is a type of medium where if you're going to profit from it, whether it's, directly off of it, making money off of advertising, or indirectly because you're finding clients for your services, or even just intrinsically because you're loving doing it and you love the value of building a relationship with an audience, you've got to be around for a while. And you have to do it for a while and have people who stick with you and are loyal. Things, Andy, that I know that you're learning, as you come up on 100 episodes. You're not going to do any of those things if you haven't been intentional and consistent with your positioning, because people won't notice you in the first place and they won't stick around because they have so many other options to find what they're looking for. And people are looking to be educated. They want to learn something. They want to be entertained. They want to be inspired. But most of all, they want to find connection and they want to spend time with people they enjoy and whose voices they really come to be comfortable with, and hosts who interact that they find camaraderie with, and interviewers who get guests to open up to where you feel like you're eavesdropping on a really intimate conversation. You might think that positioning doesn't make a difference for those things, but I think it makes all the difference for those things. So it's for any type of content that you're creating, but especially for a podcast, it's absolutely fundamental if you want to be able to have success.
How do you define positioning?
I have it defined in the course, and I'm trying to think of the exact wording that I have. But essentially, it's someone who listens to your show. What do they believe that they're listening to? Where, if you look at the overall market for shows and for, the different options that people have, what position do you fit into in that market? So it's like I was talking about with the Indiana basketball podcast. There's, 10, 12 of these shows out there. Where do we fit in relation to the other ones? And what do we stand for ourselves?
You guys do a post-game show. Is that the differentiator?
That was our initial differentiator. And this is, I think, what I was struggling to articulate is your positioning isn't just what you think it is. Your positioning is what your potential and current audience members think it is. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because we can think our positioning is whatever we want. But if we're not properly articulating that and communicating that, then that's not really what our positioning is. So that show, for example, we did the post-game show because there was a lot of other Indiana basketball content out there. And, when you're doing a podcast, you don't just position yourself against other podcasts. There's so much content now. You have to position yourself against all the other content choices. So there were other blogs out there. Obviously there was one other podcast out there. There's, other shows out there, other options that people have. So if we wanted to do Indiana basketball content, we tried to find something that there wasn't another option for this. And that's why we did the post-game show, because immediately after games, people would go to message boards and they would still talk on Twitter, but there was no one hosting a conversation that could then be listened to later. And that's why we decided to do the post-game show. And so I think, having the post-game show became our positioning. And to this day, it's still an important part of our positioning. But I think an even more important part of our positioning now, 8 years in with the same group of hosts, is the chemistry and camaraderie that we have. I think that's a very important part of our positioning, in addition to the fact that we're the only podcast that schedules and broadcasts our episodes live. So essentially our positioning is we're the guys that you can come hang out with and talk IU basketball, while we're doing it online. And that's just different from what anybody else does. And I didn't necessarily think that part of it would be as big as it's been, but ever since we started broadcasting our conversations on YouTube so people could actually see us, they've connected more with us just as individuals and as hosts, and they can see our interaction. So it's, I think, made our chemistry a bigger part of the secret sauce that makes the show work.
So in your case, the platform made a difference too, because on YouTube,
Yes.
people can comment, they can interact, whereas they could not do that if they were downloading the show on their favorite podcatcher.
Right. So it's available for that, and people can listen on demand anytime they want to. But where we've really developed that loyal audience is the people who tune in live. We always kind of thought that would be a part of it. Again, broadcasting it live, even from the beginning, but we broadcast it just as audio. And having that video component of it makes it, okay, now I can show up. I know these guys will be there. And man, I really know these guys. Like there was a huge conversation in our chat 3 weeks ago because for the first time in maybe 4 years, I shaved my beard. And this was a big thing because obviously people could see me and everybody's speculating on why I shaved my beard. Did Jerod have a job interview? What's going on? Like why is he shaving his beard? Which seems like a really silly thing, but yet it kind of shows the intimacy level with the audience that even though my face is like behind a microphone, they still notice that. And it was kind of a big conversation point, even above and beyond what we were talking about for basketball. And that's why when we go back to Bloomington and we host meetups, people come and we've, been able to generate just, extremely generous donations. And that's a big part of how we support the show. And all of that goes into it because we don't give the best analysis, I don't think. Like we're not the most plugged in. We don't have insider information. We're not breaking news. Like I think we're pretty good at analyzing the game, and I think people appreciate that we'll go deep on it. But I think more than anything, people know us, they like us, and they just enjoy spending time with us while we're talking IU basketball. And that it's been important for us to remember that is our positioning and not get too caught up in, man, our analysis has to get better. And again, our analysis does have to get better. But the main reason I think why we've succeeded is because we've been real and available and accessible. And we're there when we say we're going to be there, and people have just come to trust that. And it's important, I think, to understand that so that you know what makes you successful so that you don't do anything to harm that. Like I think if we just decide, okay, we're not going to do the live Thursday night show anymore. We're just going to put the podcast up, but man, we're really going to, dive into doing better statistical analysis, and it's going to give yeah, I think some people might like that and it would be okay, but we would lose, I think, what actually makes our show special. And I think it's been very important for us to be aware of that.
Yeah, so it sounds like as the creators, it's important to be listening to your audience because the positioning evolves over time. You have to be open to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it should. I mean, I think your positioning will naturally evolve as you learn more about your audience. And I think you should be intentional about your positioning evolving as markets change and as different opportunities, come up that you can maybe add to your show and that, maybe other people aren't filling. Positioning is definitely fluid. And so I think you start out with what you want your positioning to be, and then it can change. And I think it's important to remember that what your positioning actually is what your audience and your potential audience believes it to be. And certainly if there is something there, where that's not congruent and you think it's something different, that can really lead to some issues because your audience may not be growing and you may not know why. And that may be why is because you're just not communicating your positioning properly. So you're repelling the right kind of listeners and attracting the wrong ones. And you've got to get that in reverse. You've got to attract the right kind of people that are really going to appreciate you and your show for who it is and repel the people who are going to come and then leave you a bad review because they expected something that you're not. If that happens, on a one-off basis, it may just be because this person is, not thinking or, just a jerk or whatever. But if that's happening consistently, it may be because you're not properly communicating and attracting the right people. And positioning when it's done properly is going to do that.
Jerod, creating content is very time-consuming. You're involved in 5 podcasts. You also write blog articles. How do you think about content creation and monetization, the relationship between the two?
To me, it always comes back to the audience. When I'm creating content, I've got to create something that is valuable for the audience. Because at the end of the day, the audience is what's going to allow you to monetize that content. And there are many different ways to monetize content. Again, you can monetize it with ads, so you're kind of directly monetizing it and If more people come see this content, then your revenue just kind of goes up, in direct proportion to that. You can monetize it indirectly, and that's how we do some with the assembly call. I mean, we do monetize that directly because we have advertisers, but we're also trying to get people onto our email list so that when we do our donation drives, twice a year, people are inspired to want to help us and to want to donate. And the other part of it is, I think there's got to be some kind of intrinsic benefit to creating the content. I've spent a lot of time writing blog articles about subjects that I just wasn't that passionate about and wasn't that interested in. And again, as we mentioned, the world does not need more content like that. And so I think if I'm more selective, I guess, with the content that I try to create, to where if I'm not really enthusiastic about it, and if I don't think the audience is going to be enthusiastic about it, especially with written content, then I'm not going to do it. It's not going to be worth my time, and it's not going to be worth their time. And I think respecting the time of both parties on the ends of that content transaction are important, because if you do that, and if you do that over and over again, that will lead to more monetization, because people will realize, hey, if I go read this, this is going to be quality stuff, because that's what you train your audience to expect. And so I think the more that you can do that and keep that expectation that, hey, this is going to be good, this is going to be well thought out, this is going to be worthwhile, then you put yourself in a position over time to be able to monetize that content more.
That makes sense. I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
So you sent me a couple questions that you would ask, and obviously I knew that you were going to ask me this one from listening to the show. And so I spent some time thinking about this, because I think this is so important. And because I kind of, I know that I know how I define this, but I also think it can be really instructive and really useful to actually sit down and try and put it into a sentence, and just really put it in as succinct a way as possible. So here's what I came up with. I define success as having the resources, time, and energy to be able to enjoy regularly occurring meaningful experiences with my family and friends. I really feel like every component of that is important. One shift that I've really made in my thinking is the value of experiences over things. And so, I'm not interested in what car I'm driving beyond its ability to safely get me from point A to point B, and getting sports memorabilia, like all that stuff. I'm trying to get rid of stuff. What I want more is experiences. And so to me, success is, being able to have these experiences, for them to be regularly occurring, whether that's going to the park on a Saturday, or, like my family and I are going on vacation next week to the beach because my daughter loves the beach. But then having the resources, the time and energy to actually be able to do them. And probably the biggest one, maybe the difference in how I define it now as opposed to even just a couple of months ago, is the energy part of that. Like I've long thought about the resources and the time part. Money is obviously important. There's no question about it. We need money to do things, but it's just one component of it. If it takes you so much time to earn the money that you need, that you don't actually have the time to enjoy it, then, what's the use? But I've also come to realize, and I guess this is just, getting older, and probably the fact that I allowed myself to get a little bit, out of shape since my daughter was born, just, bad habits and putting other things as a priority over that, having the energy to be able to do it. And so that's been a big thing for me now, because if you don't have the energy, then having all the resources and the time to do what you want, that's not really going to make any difference, because you're not actually going to maximize the experience. So to me, that's it. Having the resources, time, and energy to be able to enjoy regularly occurring meaningful experiences with my family and friends. If I can do that, then that to me is success.
I love that. And I think it reflects your job and your career in like marketing, content creating, because you're a 21st century employee and entrepreneur and business person. The work that you do gives you tremendous flexibility, that you're not commuting 2 hours a day to sit in an office from 9 to 5.
Yeah, no, I mean, and now having my daughter, she's almost 3, and really for the last now 18 months, when I stopped working at Copyblogger full time, and have really been able to focus on her and make her the top priority. And I'm still doing work, but as you and I were talking about, she goes to a preschool program, and I find ways to get work done around that. But to be able to come home and have lunch with her, like that to me is a regularly occurring, meaningful experience that I'm glad that I get to have. So I feel, even though I know that I could be making more money right now, and I could be, the projects that I'm on, I could be pushing them further along each day. If I had 8 hours a day to dedicate to this, I'm okay with that going slower, because I'm having experiences now with her at this age that I know I will cherish much more than the extra, couple of hours of work that I put in. It was kind of a difficult decision to make in one sense, but on the other hand, it really wasn't, because when I tried to project it out and figure out what will I regret more, I figured I would regret more not taking this time if I was able to do it. And so, as it does for a lot of people, having my daughter has really crystallized my priorities and helped me just see life a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, it's invaluable, and it goes by so quickly.
Yeah, it really has. It really has.
Well, thanks, Jerod. Thanks for sharing your insights and your story, your experiences. Can you tell the Inspired Money listener where to find more and follow you?
Yeah. Anybody interested in the topics that we talked about with podcasting, obviously going to sugarrunner.fm. We haven't done a new episode in 6 months now, but we have an archive of 120 some episodes there that talk about a lot of these things. And I think we always really tried to focus on fundamentals. So even though some of the specifics may have changed, I think a lot of those fundamentals will be the same. And then I'm on Twitter at Jerod Morris. But I always like to give out my email address on podcasts so that, if anybody really has a question, email is the best way to get a hold of me. I'm not always, I don't always get on Twitter regularly, but if you email me, I'll definitely see it. So just my personal email, jarodmorris40@gmail.com. If there's ever any questions, any way that I can help out, I'd love to. So feel free to use that.
That is mad dedication. To put it out there.
Yeah. Well, I have found that some of the best connections, with people who become longtime friends and audience members happen via email. And that's, one of the things with any project that I'm on, if I'm doing an email newsletter and people respond to it, I always reply. I hope that my response rate is 100%. I hope that I haven't ever missed, replying to someone who replied to one of my emails, because I think it's the best way to connect with people in an age when connection can be so fragmented online. So I love the opportunity to connect with people by email.
Well, thanks, Jerod. Thank you. And thank you for your positive impact on Inspired Money.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy, and good luck with your, I know you're not at 100 episodes yet, but you're getting there. Good luck with getting the next 100 and just continuing to inspire people as you do here.
Thank you. So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I love how Jerod prioritizes experiences over things. In fact, his career path is aligned with his values. His content marketing through blogging and podcasting provides him with a lot of flexibility. He's able to work remotely, and that allows him to spend more time at home with his young daughter and his wife. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission to better yourself and your money. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment and takeaway, let me know by posting in the private Inspired Money Makers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Kimo will be on tour with Weird Al Yankovic and band, so check weirdal.com for the no-strings-attached summer tour. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.